Hey everyone, in this video I want to review a new book that just came out by Lewis Howes, The Mask of Masculinity. I think this book is revolutionary and it's a breath of fresh air, and that means something that I'm doing a video on this because a lot of books don't really make it onto my YouTube channel because they don't pass certain filters, or they just don't make the cut after those filters are applied. There's a lot of books I'm constantly analyzing and more that are being published every year, but just some of them just don't make the cut. And this one did for one main reason. It was a breath of fresh air towards the standard self-development stuff that's constantly being pushed. The generic self-help tips that is in a industry that's kind of saturated, in my opinion, as far as the overall guru space goes, and when they're trying to teach it to everyone. Plus, this book is focusing on a topic that I am really interested in lately, which is just your inner psychology and what is preventing you from succeeding in life due to your psychology. I think this is a huge thing because a lot of people, what they're struggling with, whether it's in terms of making more money, having strong relationships with family, friends, making friends, or just getting dates or keeping dates, their problems are often inner and internal and more qualitative than something that's quantitative or direction based, or can just be answered by checking something off a list or reading some top 10 tips article online. And most likely, if you've had any experience with any form of the self-help industry, whether it's reading fitness tips or personal finance tips or business and side hustle and entrepreneurship tips, or just general psychology based habit formation, you'll notice that oftentimes things aren't working even if you try and follow the instructions of these articles and books. It's not these steps. It's not like, oh, you do this and then you do this, you get the idea, then you sell it, and then you make a lot of money. There's a lot of things that are obstacles, and oftentimes they are not easy to fix. They're not quick fixes. So the truth about a lot of self-development is that it comes down to inner psychology and the problems with that, whether it's fixing procrastination or dealing with your fears and your inner traumas or your insecurities. A lot of these things are manifesting into excuses that you make yourself as to why you can't do something, and that's really oftentimes the cause of your errors. Now, Lewis Howes, his story and his reason for making this book has to do with his own masks. So this is a huge problem that a lot of men and some women have too, in which case they have been taught by culture, by society, by the people that they grew up around, that there has to be a certain identity with your gender. So as a man, Lewis was given many of these expectations that a man should follow in order to be respected, to be a part of a group, and so forth. Sometimes that involved never showing emotion, never showing yourself crying or suffering or failing, and it manifested in ways that really screwed him over. If you're not familiar with Lewis Howes, he is one of these self-help guys. He has a top 100 podcast called The School of Greatness, and of course all the social media platforms, especially Instagram and YouTube, he's been firing on and doing fairly well. He made his money in internet marketing, and he is a millionaire in that space. His podcast and show and website is called The School of Greatness, and he also now has an annual summit called the Summit of Greatness. Now there's good and bad to my experiences personally with Lewis and his brand, but I kind of want to focus on the good in this video. And I just think this book is incredible because the books that came before it was titled The School of Greatness, and it was just a more so generic self-help book. But this one really dives into something new and different. So why should you care? What are the downfalls of really not mastering your inner psychology? I want to get very specific in reasons why you should care about this, so you see the interest and potentially consider checking this book out. One of the potential downsides is what Lewis suffered. He had a lot of suffering going on in his life. He was raped as a child by a man, and he hid that for many years. One of the things that he thought that men had to do was they had to always be strong, never show any weaknesses, and of course he hid that, and of course he suffered because of that. Another huge thing other than just suffering that can come from this is toxic relationships. Sometimes no relationship you get into romantically or in business-wise or anywhere else is a good one because you yourself are broken. And a lot of people tend to turn outward at other people and point fingers at them for causing relationships to fail. But they can only really start to fix themselves when they start turning inward and realizing and being able to acknowledge or consider the fact that they're the ones who are causing this issue. With Lewis, he never wanted to be wrong. So when he argued with his girlfriend, they obviously, because sometimes arguments do happen, they obviously erupted into something that was horrendous. These arguments got very chaotic and toxic, and that went on for many months. But he just kept trying to do that, and it wasn't working. So because he thought that as a man you always have to win, you have to seem invincible, you shouldn't lose, losing is bad, and that also, he translated that also into the small things such as always being right in a debate or argument, and that caused a lot of problems with his communication. Now of course that doesn't mean that you can't be fairly successful in certain areas of your life while still having these problems. Of course, he is a great example of this. For most of his life, he's an easygoing, successful, rich, seemingly positive, happy person. But that's sometimes not enough. Those cracks, those small moments, maybe it's just a few seconds in a day or a few minutes, those can really burst out into a lot more suffering than you want to deal with. That can come back to haunt him. This book goes into a lot more detail. Let me show you how it's broken out. Here's the table of contents, and essentially and I really like how this is broken out. The table of contents is broken out into different, what is called masks. So what a mask is something that you place in front of your face to disguise how you're really feeling underneath. And I think this book goes really deep into this, and also goes into how you can identify and fix these things. And I think many people have different masks, and he lists some of the big ones in here. He even goes really deep and personal by really talking about Robin Williams, a Oscar, Grammy, and Emmy winning actor and comedian who seemed always positive and on top of the world but ended up committing suicide in 2014. So he really goes into what these things are and the downsides and devastation that can come from looking at these. And you can kind of see the big theme of this book is trying to be someone you know you're not in order to avoid judgment or maybe whatever else. Sometimes it's to meet the expectations of society. And my mind immediately gravitates towards gay men. Gay men oftentimes have struggled with this because there's a certain standard of how masculine and assertive you have to be as a man, but many gay men don't naturally fall into this category. Now, I'm a YouTube junkie, and lately I've seen plenty of vlogs of flamboyantly gay men who are just doing their thing and doing well. And for some reason, they're able to do that without judgment, or able to tolerate that. But I do think there's still plenty of issues going on. And it just goes to show you it's not just confined to gay men. Straight men like Lewis and myself struggle with this too. Now, let me walk through each of these masks real quickly for you. There's the stoic mask, the athlete mask, the material mask, the sexual mask, the aggressive mask, the joker mask, the invincible mask, the know-it-all mask, the alpha mask. I'm not going to go into detail on each of these. You can check out the book at the library or buy it used or for new on Amazon if you want. I will kind of touch on a couple of these to give you an idea and really show you how they struck me. The joker mask is one that really kind of invoked in me some feelings of, wow, I never considered things that way. I didn't think that humor really could have been a mask, but it is. He really explained well how trying to make others laugh and bringing laughter into an environment and developing that sense of humor and being funny is sometimes only done so that you can take the spotlight off of yourself and off of your suffering, or to bring attention to yourself and make yourself be seen as an equal. And now, after I figured this out and I learned this, I started seeing all the parallels and references of this from successful people in interviews I listened to on podcasts years ago that I never really connected the dots or really dug into it. And there's plenty of examples of comedians who have gone on interviews and said, like, I was never that funny guy. Kasim G, a famous YouTuber, he said this in the Ear Biscuits podcast by Red and Link. And he kind of revealed that, yes, he was like this really rich, successful YouTuber who sold his company to Disney for a lot of money. But, you know, growing up and for most of his life, he was an outcast because of how he looked, his ethnicity, and so forth. And so he used humor to fit in. It's even something that anime and manga was aware of. If you've ever seen the world famous manga / anime Naruto, the main character Naruto, for a good portion of his childhood, that's what he did. He was this outcast because he was this demon-possessed ninja, and because he wanted to fit in, he diverted people's attention from what was different from him to what was similar by making others laugh and becoming the class clown. And I never really thought of it that way because I was never the funny guy, and I always assumed that funny people were better off, they did better with women, which may be true, but this book really goes into detail on how this type of humor can really sometimes be a mask that destroys your life, because if you're constantly trying to please other people and you never really show your true self or take care of yourself, eventually you'll crack like Robin Williams did. So I just want to touch on a couple more of these masks and call it a day here, and really just, you know, give a little bit of a speech about the whole this whole new industry that's erupting. The Invincible Mask. Now this is one that I can see very macho, sports-themed guys get into. I was more of a nerd, you know, very academic focused, but I still did play a few sports growing up. I did soccer for many years. I reffed soccer. I also did track and field, cross country, tiny bit of lacrosse. I do CrossFit now. So I can understand this. And it's not just sports, but many other things. Lewis was he's like a All-American handball player. He played every single sport in high school, and he did all sorts of other stuff. He competed nationally for triathlons, or with a decathlon, was it? But the point was, he really felt that as a man, you had to be invincible with everything. Like, you couldn't show your flaws, you couldn't show anything wrong with you, you couldn't lose. And this translated into how he presented himself, how he talked to people, how he debated, how he showed his business, and everything else. I think with all of these masks, different people have different issues. For me, some of these masks have already been cracked or destroyed, which is a good thing, because of self-development. For other people, for most people in fact, who think self-development is weird or niche, which, let's just be honest, in the real world it is. Like 99% of the people my age that I meet or talk to, they're really not into self-development as I am. And so therefore people have different masks, if not all of these masks, and that can be a huge problem. For me, I was very blessed to have stumbled across Warren Buffett a few years ago, and him amongst many other entrepreneurs changed my mindset and thinking on a few of these masks, such as the know-it-all mask. Him and his partner Charlie Munger really gave a lot of stories and quotes and insights into the power of staying humble and humility and questioning your initial beliefs and biases. So the know-it-all mask is something that I try my best to stay genuine and preface any of my statements by saying my theory is, rather than just stating it, and in having an open mind to question or recount or renounce something I once claimed or take another opinion on it. So although I do consume a lot of knowledge, I try not to brag about it and definitively say it's right. I take a more scientific approach. However, there are other masks, like the material mask, that I've kind of cracked deeply because, again, of many role models. Warren Buffett again comes to mind. He's rich beyond belief. 50 plus billion dollars in net worth. Yet he still lives in this tiny little house because it's not always about showing off. It's not about just having it for the sake of having it or showing off, but the utility or value you get out of it. And for him, a mansion would be just nothing but more hassle and more upkeep and maintenance fees to deal with than anything that he would get joy from. So it really changed my mindset on what this is. But the material mask is one where if you are someone who is consumed with money and fame or status, like most of the world is, and it's genetic for sure on a primal level to survive and reproduce, but also especially with commercialization and a capitalistic society, sometimes you can get too wrapped up in the worst parts of it and sacrifice your humanity, your other values and objectives like family time, good relationships, contribution, purpose, meaning, passion of your work for just more money and ego and status. That can destroy your life. And then just showing that off when you yourself on the inside are depressed or unhappy, that can just spiral into even more disparities and turn you into a hypocrite that creates resentment in you and depression. So this is a really interesting book. I'm going to read a short passage. It says, I just picked out a random page. This is from the Material Mask chapter. This section is towards the end of the chapter, and it goes into what can we do right now. So he's kind of briefed you on what the material mask is and gone through a few stories. He says, the road to freedom from the material mask is not an easy one, but at the end of the road is a healthy sense of self-worth. And that has always been a difficult issue for men in our culture. This issue is so hard because we have been taught to attach our self-worth to what we have and what we do, to our possessions, our roles in life, and our bank balances. What we need to realize is that we are valuable regardless of what we have. We need to recognize that while living behind a material mask, there will never be such a thing as enough when it comes to a sufficient sense of self-worth as a man. This means that what it all comes down to is gratitude. Then he goes into some other stuff that may help you achieve mastery over your materialistic mask. He says, what's available when you drop this mask? Remember, material man, you are a gift, and there's so much to celebrate about you. The people who care about you the most have been waiting to see what's behind your mask. It's time to reveal the real you. These are some of the things that can flood back into your life when you drop this mask. Fulfillment, worthiness, inner peace. Attracting people who are interested in who you are, not how much you have. Feeling enough. Satisfaction with your achievements. Gratitude. I think it's really important how he kind of walks through the benefits of shedding this mask as well as the downsides and tangential problems with having the mask. A sense of self-worth and self-esteem that is always in the flux and based off what others think. And the fact that once you shed this mask, you will also be able to attract and be content with people who love you for who you are on the inside and not just what they see on the outside. Now, I do believe that the outside is a reflection of your inside as well. So don't take it to an extreme and say, okay, that means I can just like not do my hair and not brush my teeth and wear clothes like a homeless person because it's just the inside that matters. I think there's a mix of both, but I think what he's getting at is avoiding the people who are extremely and only and superficially focused on the external. So I think this book is very healthy and functional. Of course, there's not, and this is where I'm starting to get into the book review section of this video. There's not much science to back it up. A lot of his advice is based on anecdotes through his own experiences or his stories that he heard from other people. Having said that, doesn't mean that it's completely invaluable. I believe that this genre or industry or area of books or advice is somewhat lacking, and I'm so excited that he picked out this book. It definitely seems more genuine, as if he really chose this topic because it was his own struggles, and he felt compelled to write about this to help people, not because he did some market analysis and he thought he could make a quick buck by getting into this sphere. And it just seemed more genuine than the first book, The School of Greatness, which everyone kind of seems to be pumping out millionaire and self-help books into the market nowadays, whether it's to spread their own brand or make more money, I don't know, but they all kind of sound the same with very similar advice. So this was a breath of fresh air for sure. I think having a lot more science-backed evidence and reasons, not just using confirmation bias to cherry pick the advice that would support his points, but really kind of arguing both sides would have made this book even better. I do think there's a lot of studies already done on topics tangential to this that he could have sourced from, but overall, like his anecdotes on his own from his own experiences and those of other people like celebrities and all the successful people he's interviewed on his podcast is nonetheless incredibly useful. I think this book is great for everyone. Now, it's not a magic pill. It will not solve all problems, but it will get you far along the path. Like I said, there aren't too many books around this whole theme of masculinity or dealing with your inner psychology and problems. There's only a few that really stood out to me, and I already did a video on that on YouTube. It was titled something along the lines of Top 5 Books on Masculinity, and this would be number 6 in the list now. But those top 5 books, you can check out the list. A few of them were The Way of Men by Jack Donovan, The Way of the Superior Man by David Dida. Then there's No More Mr. Nice Guy by Dr. Robert Glover. Those are must-read books, and they really dive deep into what courage is, why men matter, how to be a man of value, why men are the way they are in terms of the assertiveness and aggressiveness that they have, and why certain people have problems with assertiveness or connecting with other people or standing up for themselves. And that has to do, and all of these books kind of dive into evolutionary psychology, evolutionary biology, tribal warfare, and all the psychology and science and history behind why men are the way they are and why they aren't. Some of it having to do with modern society, the lack of male role models growing up since most teachers in schools are now female, and the lack of certain teachings and around warfare, fighting, defense, outdoor activities that have been the way for tens of thousands of years, but are now defunct in modern society. Incredible book. I think it's well worth your time. I will leave a link in the description to the Amazon version of this book. If you go through my link in the description of this YouTube video, I will get a small commission if you purchase through that link at no extra cost to you. Again, of course, you don't have to go through my link, and you could just purchase elsewhere at the same price, but I won't get that commission as well. This book, I think, is great for anyone who has any hints that they may be suffering from something like this, or they're identifying maybe problems with connecting with people, making friendships, attracting the people they want, any form of discontentment around relationships, self-worth, self-esteem. I mean, it covers so many areas, really. But if you have any hint that maybe your problems stem from some type of inner psychology that you're dealing with, specifically focused on pretending to be someone you are not, this book is definitely for you. I kind of want to end by kind of revealing a bit more details about me personally and how the book relates, to just give you a sense of relatedness and a sense to show you that I'm definitely not perfect as well. For me, I think this book has a lot of meaning. I do have masks that I hold upon myself, and maybe some of these masks aren't really completely addressed by this book. Like I mentioned, there are many masks and many psychological problems out there, not just the ones mentioned in this book. But for me, this sometimes revolves around fear of judgment, fear of embarrassment, fear of not fitting in, fear of rejection from others, anxiety around other men tearing me down, attacking me verbally, psychologically, or physically, out of jealousy of, I don't know, like me approaching a girl or me talking to other people. I also have deep insecurity sometimes and uncomfortableness with certain older men, probably because of smaller altercations with men who mistreated me or were just very mean to me and moderately abusive when I was growing up and going through school. Nothing as traumatic as Lewis Howes, where he was raped as a child, but definitely had some instances of bullying growing up and verbal abuse from teachers. So basically, I do think that these can be overcome, and don't just resort to those few handful of books that I did mention. A psychologist, a psychiatrist is a coach for your brain, just like a physical trainer is one for your body. So don't be ashamed of having to go to one. If anything, it can dramatically up-level your game. If you can't afford that, there is a great website called psychologytoday.com, which offers male public support groups. So you better take action, otherwise nothing's going to change if you just sit there and take in some knowledge. You've got to really do some self-growth and stay positive. That's it for this review of this book. Incredible stuff. I could talk about this for a long time, but I hope you got the gist of this, and thanks so much for watching. Hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.